Welcome back to Texas Sawdust, everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to take this and turn it into this. Welcome to my kitchen. If you saw my shop tour video, you know that currently I'm in the middle of building my own house. My goal is to build as much as possible myself, and that includes doing all the upper cabinets, lower cabinets, and the island here in the kitchen. Right now, I've got some 2x4s with a piece of plywood and a sheet of laminate on top just to get us by. Our dish storage is down low. Our temporary pantry is over here on some metal cabinet racks. And we are ready to move on from this. I know my wife is especially ready to move on from this. So this is going to be part one, where I'm going to start working on the upper cabinets. I want to take you along and I want to show you how you can build your own cabinets. So let's get into it.
The first step is to break down your plywood sheets. So I get my plywood out, I lay it down on my workbench, and I check all the corners to make sure I find one that is perfectly square. For those of you who don't know, plywood often is not cut perfectly square. It's cut extremely fast in a factory somewhere, and oftentimes there are corners that are perfectly square and some that are not, and so I like to cue off of the ones that are nice and square. After I've got my plywood broke down, I take all those pieces and run it through the table saw. Here you want to make sure that you get all your sides or your bottoms, tops, all cut at the same setting on your table saw to ensure that everything is exactly the same width. And then I take it over to the chop saw and I break down the length to the proper length. You can kind of see I have some clamps in the background getting it at the proper length.
All right, I just wanted to show you what planning out your cuts ahead of time can do for your material usage. This is all the waste that I have. I've cut out all the backs, all the sides, bottoms, shelves. The only thing left to cut as far as material goes is the dadoes, and I need to trim the shelves to fit perfectly within the cabinets once I get the bodies together. So all of this together maybe amounts to a quarter sheet out of 6 sheets of usage. That's a pretty good material yield when you plan everything out ahead of time so that you can get everything exactly where it needs to be. Let's talk about setting up your dado stack for doing cabinets. When I set mine up, I like it to be nice and tight so that if I set a piece of scrap in there, it doesn't fall out, but it easily goes in there. This was my first setup, and it's a little loose. I didn't like that, so I just reduced it by about 6 thousandths. This is my second setup, and as you can see, it's nice and tight, and it holds it in there, but slides easily in and out. If you ever have any issues when you're assembling with your dados this tight, you can just sand the edges of whatever you're sliding into the dado. It won't be seen, but it'll help guide it in.
One thing of note real quick while I cut these dados in the panels, make sure when you're setting up your dado stack that you choose a piece that is the thickest of all your stock. I accidentally chose one that was thinnest, and that made my dados especially tight. Here, I like to just make sure that no matter what, I'm not going to blow through with my pocket screws. So I'm just doing some tests here to ensure that doesn't happen. At this point, it's just putting pocket screws on the front, back, sides, and everywhere you can think of.
Well, I screwed up. I was cruising. I was putting pocket holes in, getting ready for a dry assembly. And I realized I was going a little too quick. These dados over here are good. This one right here, going down the center, is correct. But these 3 over here, that one shouldn't exist, and these 2 should be in a different location. There's actually 2 doors here, an appliance garage there, and then 2 doors up here, but these are at a different level than these. So I've kind of sat here and thought about this for a little bit, and I think what I might do, I don't really want to cut a whole nother piece because this one's really big. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it right down the center of this dado, since there will be a divider right here I'll recut this piece. I'll glue and pocket screw this together. Once it gets assembled, it'll all be glued, should be structurally sound and hidden behind that wall. Nobody to know, except for every single one of you who's watching this video. Now everybody knows. I've repaired this piece now. I cut another half. I put the dadoes in it in the correct location, put a rabbet on this side, glued it together, pocket screwed it. I'll show you the back. So, been pocket screwed together. This isn't the strongest orientation for a pocket screw, but mostly this was used to just clamp this together as the glue dried. I did, however, mess up again when I was cutting this. As I was putting the rabbet on this side so I could complete the dado, when I put it back together, I let the panel get a little squirrely on me and gouged out an area right here. All was not lost though. I took a piece of plywood, got it thinner so I could put it in here, use the chisel to clear that out, and now I've glued that back in, and I'll show you how I'm just going to clean that up.
After the glue dries, I just trim this down, and I like to get a setup block or a 1-2-3 block and use it just to keep my chisel flat and get a nice straight cut. At that point, it's just sanding it smooth.
With the backs cut out and the dados in them, I can take a measurement of how wide my shelves are going to be. I'm waiting to do that until now so that I can get the exact measurement of what the actual back is, because the shelves are going to match the width of the back, and that way I can ensure that they'll fit. For the ones that only have one shelf in them and no divider, I can just take a width measurement, 33 7/16. I'll probably cut 33 3/8, a 16th shy of that, to ensure that they'll slide in. For the ones that have the divider in them, I've actually got dados on the side of this divider. These I'm going to wait until I've got this assembled minus the shelves, take a width measurement, ensure that those will fit.
The next step was to cut everything down. I was cutting all the shelves at the exact same time to make sure they're all exactly the same length. And then I started my first dry assembly. This is when I noticed that dados were just a touch tight. And so I sanded some edges to help everything fit and went on to assemble everything. Kind of had to use a rubber mallet to get everything to really slide into place, which isn't ideal, but it's a very tight fit, so that's nice. The front center panel here, you can really see how tight those dados were. They went in, but it was a bit of an effort to get that panel in, so double check your plywood for sure. After that, I screwed everything together and moved on to the next cabinet, got that one together, and then it was on to adding the shelves. They fit just how I wanted. I want a nice snug fit on my shelves, but at the same time, they fit no problem. Here you can kind of see.
At this point, I've got the cabinet carcass together. Everything's dry fit, and the only thing left is to disassemble and sand, as well as finish the shelves. The shelves are going to have the front 3/4 inch of it cut off, and then we're going to glue on a piece of hardwood birch to match the rest of the cabinet. That will give it a nice front edge, as well as make it really durable for all dishes and everything that's going to get put away in these cabinets. At this point, we're going to add the hardwood edges to the shelves. You do not have to have your shelves cut to the full depth of your cabinet like I did. You can cut them 3/4 inch less at the beginning of when you're cutting out your shelves. I prefer to keep it full length. That way I can dry fit, make sure my shelves fit perfectly. I'll trim a little bit off, add a little bit more material on there, and come back to this exact same measurement. I know everything's going to work.
The next step is to take your hardwood edges that you're going to make and run it through the jointer and planer to get rid of all the rough sawn marks, and then run it through your table saw. I was able to use this thicker piece and get 2 pieces from one strip by cutting it down to 3/4 inch thick and then ripping that 3/4 inch thick piece in half. One tip that you can do after you cut them down on the table saw is you can actually take them over to the planer and run them through the planer so that they're all perfectly uniform and they have a nice flat face for gluing it up. Everybody's favorite part is emptying the sawdust. We all love it.
Now that I have a hardwood edge, I can glue this onto my shelf. It's 3/4 inch thick this way, but it's actually a little bit more than 3/4 inch thick this way. The reason is my goal is to put this on here, glue it on, and actually lift up my piece of plywood just a little bit so that I have an edge on each side that then I can flush trim and make it perfectly match the plywood.
Here I've got my patented glue spreader out, and I am gluing on the front hardwood edge to the shelves. This gets done for every single one, and I left the hardwood long so that I could cut it down to perfectly match. I didn't have to worry about it while I was gluing. I like to wipe down my glue ahead of time. It's just easier on my tools, I think. Glue is kind of hard on tools. You can see how it sticks off on both sides right there. At this point, it's on to sanding, everybody's favorite part. I know it's my favorite part. By now, the glue is dry and I could get all my shelves out and cut down the hardwood edges. After cutting down the hardwood edges, I was able to use a flush trim router and then run it through the router table and put chamfers on the edges. And the shelves were ready to be cut down to final size. And back to sanding. Again, it's my favorite part. After they're done sanding, I put them back in the cabinet to make sure they fit and they look good.
This is where we're going to end part 1 of this series. All of our pieces are disassembled and they're ready for finish. The reason I'm not assembling them is because I'm going to do a spray finish, and it's a lot easier to not get runs with a spray finish if you leave all your parts disassembled. Once we put finish on it, we can assemble it and then it'll be ready for install. So join me next week where we dive into face frames and doing side panels for your upper cabinets. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out. And remember, get out to the shop. If you shop, all right, let's, when,